Pitch to Pro is the official podcast of USL Arkansas. This will be our platform to tell our story about the club and the special place that we call home, Northwest Arkansas. This is a journey. We want to bring you along for the ride. We'll share what's going on behind the curtain, help educate the community at large about soccer, our league, and give updates on the progress of the club along the way. Together, we'll explore and unpack our journey to professional soccer, the magic that is NWA, our community, and talk all things soccer from on the pitch to behind the scenes, telling the story of our club. Pitch to Pro podcast is proudly sponsored by podcastvideos.com. Podcastvideos.com is Northwest Arkansas's premier podcast recording studio. Equipped with industry-leading equipment, the recording studio and services save you time, money, and hassle. They are dedicated to helping you create, record, and publish high-quality podcasts for your audience. Be sure to check them out today at podcastvideos.com. Hello and welcome to the Pitch to Pro podcast. I'm your host, Wes Harris, Managing Director for USL Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas's professional soccer club playing in the United Soccer League. Last time we heard from co-founder Chris Martinovic about his background, connection to soccer, and to the Northwest Arkansas community. Chris, welcome back to the show. Last we talked, we heard about how you wanted to, more for the community that you came to love and live in and call home, Northwest Arkansas. And you had just had a few of the league executives, USL executives, out in the market for a visit to kind of check out if this was a good spot for potential expansion for the league. And so I wanted to kind of continue that story a little bit and build on what was the conversation around and what were things that you guys were talking about? Like why, a lot of what we hear, right, through our journey is why soccer and why Northwest Arkansas? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a nice kind of jumping off point from last time we talked.
Yeah, it is really great opportunity to talk to the folks in USL because they have they've been growing, right? And they have a really aggressive expansion plan, and arguably the fastest growing league in U.S. professional sports right now.
Yeah.
And so we weren't on their radar, right, initially. Mm-hmm. Had that discussion to kind of at least start getting into the mix, right? But an expansion process takes multiple years, right, from beginning to end. And so we'll work through that.
What do you mean
journey.
You can't just flip the switch and snap your fingers and there's a team here, Chris? What are you talking about?
Part of it is just it takes time, getting the right people, getting the right location. All those things are important. The big part of it is making sure that this is the right market to do it, right? While my passion was superseding anything here, and any one person that gave me negative feedback, I was able to find 50 that gave me positive feedback on.
Yeah.
So that quickly changed, and not changed, but really propelled me to keep moving this concept forward.
Give you a lot of confidence.
It did. It really did.
Yeah.
And that happened, over like the first year. Because at that time, it was still just an idea. We had a few meetings, right? It was not taking a lot of time. It was just, I started to socialize and start to target certain folks that I think could really help build this, right? You want the snowball to grow and get bigger and bigger. And you physically, nobody can do this by themselves. And so I know what my gaps are, right? I had a lot of passion. I love the sport. I love professional sports. I love how it can connect communities. I love how your families can come together at stadiums and kids can have memories for the rest of their life. And there's all these, tangible and intangible benefits, right?
Yeah.
But, I've never done this, right?
Yeah.
So while I've played the game, I've worked in the business world for many years and have numerous contacts across U.S. soccer, I've never had the experience of actually trying to launch a expansion franchise.
Yeah.
And so through that, there was a lot of, I'll use the word selling, which sometimes seems negative, but more so with outside people in the region, right? So it's making sure everyone at USL was constantly putting us above other markets, right? Because you're trying to get more their share of mind to be focused on Northwest Arkansas versus the 40 other markets that they could be looking at.
Well, and this is something, honestly, that you and I's background in consumer goods, that probably prepped you a lot for those conversations because anybody in the vendor community knows it's all about, if you're on a customer team, yes, you all play for the same company and the same team, but you want your customer to have the resources that you guys need to win and succeed and be growing and hitting targets and all those things. So I'm sure that helped prep you for those
Absolutely.
conversations.
Not only do you want your customer internally to have all the support, but when you're talking to your customer, you want to have more influence than the other guys do, right?
Exactly.
And you do that through credibility and trust and building a relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. Same with this process, right? It just doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to have people believe in what I was talking to them about, right? And some people were instantly on board. Some people took a little longer. And so we started to build that support. And we talked to different communities. And really the biggest, like people say, what is the biggest thing about how to develop an expansion franchise? And there's a million steps to this. Wes, you're living a lot of them right now.
Yeah.
It's the first and the most important piece is about where you're going to play and where the stadium's going to go.
Yeah.
Right. We'll spend a little more time on that, but that was the majority of the discussions. Different towns, different individual landowners, different properties, bigger complexes, smaller complexes. What's the right setting?
Yeah.
Are you accessible? Are you open to all? Are there entertainment things around the stadium that, so we'll talk more about that part for sure. But that was where a lot of the time was spent.
That's where your time was spent after the league kind of came. They said, hey, here's next step. This is what you got to look for. And so you had to go kind of on almost like a real estate tour, right? Like you kind of had to you were doing this almost largely by yourself.
At the beginning, with the league support. But again, I knew the market better than the league did, but they started to connect with, municipalities and chambers of commerce. And there was support systems that we started to build, right? And that was really important. To move this further and move it along and keep progressing. And so it's just baby steps. It's just you're little by little getting more traction and more support. Interesting conversation that happened in the middle of COVID, actually the beginning of COVID in 2020, was that I was introduced to this gentleman named Warren Smith. And folks now know Warren Smith as the co-founder here with me on USL Arkansas. What I knew a little bit about Warren Smith, it was his path of success that he had previously. And so in that 2020 COVID window, we sat outside of the Starbucks in Bella Vista, and I wondered why he was in Northwest Arkansas. And Jake had reached out and said, hey man, like you got to get with Warren. And I said, well, I kind of know that name. He's a pretty big deal. He's done this very successfully in San Diego with Landon Donovan in Sacramento, and come to find out multiple times before. And so we met, and I said, Warren, I'm really I feel like the community can get behind this. I'm getting so much positive feedback. I have a lot of soccer network connections. USL is very supportive of what we're doing. They want a team here. Yeah. They see what this community can be. And but I don't really know how to actually do this, right? Mm-hmm. So I was really open with him, and he was great. He gave me a couple of pointers immediately. A lot of it was about the location, right? It really, really was a lot about the location.
It's such a niche skill set. Right? Like launching and starting a professional sports team. Not many people, it's such a small community. Like there's so many sports teams all over the world, but it's such a small community of people that kind of have that drive and passion and find themselves in positions to be able to do it. And, you being one of them with Warren and his background and his story, which we'll talk about. But just super cool that, again, love the game, it'll love you back. Another example of absolutely, kind of finding yourself.
That contact was only because I love the game. I was trying to help spread the game more, give more opportunities, and that's how it actually came about. And so when Warren and I met, Warren was at the time still the president and operating the day-to-day operations for the San Diego Loyal. Yeah, and so which is the last club that he founded. We call him a serial founder.
Serial founder.
And he gave me some great advice and said, hey, I'm here to help. Let me know when you do. But I can't leave what I'm doing in the middle of this project. I think at that time they were only in existence for maybe a year. So they were literally in their still launch phase of it. And so we just stayed in touch, and kind of years went by. We crossed paths a little bit, kept updated about the different locations that we were looking at. Warren almost immediately started mentioning, though, Pinnacle Hills back then. Yeah. I mean, he really was very single. And I said, there's just not a lot of land there. Yeah. Because at the time we were looking for 20, 30, 40, 50 acres. Right. So you kind of limit your opportunities of where to go. We thought it'd also be great to have some fields around it, and maybe it's a athletic complex with stadium. And we had some of those discussions with different land opportunities. But you do limit your opportunities. You also limit your access to population and how close we can be to fun and exciting things that are provided by downtowns and their entertainment districts. And so he was talking about that really early on. So we fast forward and we keep working a few different angles in Northwest Arkansas, connecting with communities, connecting with people, building more support. The other big step change that happened at that time was we started working with Steve Lane at Colliers International. And that was a really tremendous decision on our part to bring them in, because they were able to do a real market analysis of the entire market from northern Northwest Arkansas and Centerton and Bentonville all the way down to Fayetteville, right? And now you obviously want to be somewhat centrally located. That helps. It's not mandatory, right? But it helps to make it easy. You want to be close to a highway. Again, you could survive maybe if you're not that close, but it's always better. It's always easier. There's been proven, and Warren has done this, and we've seen it in other teams that have been successful. And so Steve Lane was really the kind of the vehicle to actually really get to where we ended up in Pinnacle Hills. And that was, we narrowed it down to like a final 15. Yeah. And through that 15, we started looking at metrics where we had, great community engagement. We had access to all different, walks of life in Northwest Arkansas. And we just kind of kept coming back to Rogers and Pinnacle Hills. And that was kind of the biggest game changer, because you can do a lot of other things wrong. Mm-hmm. You can't make up for being in the wrong location. Yeah. And we've seen it with other clubs that haven't operated successfully. Almost always, it's always been because they're not in the right location, right?
Well, and something that Warren's said several times that always sticks out to me is you need to be in a place where people are already used to coming, and they already are. There's instances and examples of where pro clubs or teams have built a new stadium that is, a big kind of swath of land, but it's come with a whole host of other development around it at the same time. And it's not, we build it and hope that they will come kind of strategy, right? And it's really the kind of way to not ensure your success, but give yourself the best chance of success, is putting yourself in a place where that people are already used to coming for entertainment and entertaining themselves. And that's why we love our location so much. And, we'll talk all day about it, but, that was something that really stuck out. And I think people get that, right? In the reaction that we've gotten so far, every single time. I have never come across a person yet, and as soon as we cut this, somebody's going to chime in, but I'll knock on wood here, but every single person has said, unbelievable location, absolutely killer. I can't believe you guys got that. That's going to be so great. I can't wait to go to games there. It's going to be the perfect spot.
From soccer fans and non-soccer fans as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so while we were doing that and getting close to that property, I was also trying to learn a lot on my own and talking to other folks in the league that operate teams in other markets, sometimes bigger markets, sometimes small markets, just to educate myself and really keep progressing and figuring out how to actually maybe pull this thing off, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're starting to get some ideas that this could happen, right? At the beginning, it was a pipe dream. Now we're at the point where there's momentum here. We're starting to talk about a really great location, starting to pull some good people into the process. So now we're, let's say, 2.5-ish years in. And at that point, I did some trips. I went to different markets. I went to Greenville, South Carolina, which is actually a really lovely place. If you've never been, it's really awesome.
I've played a youth tournament there.
Yeah, growing region of the country. And again, the game had connected me from New Jersey to a former U.S. national team legend, one of the pioneers of U.S. soccer, named John Harkes, who's the current coach of the Greenville Triumph, USL League One team. Very successful team as well, very successful coach, tremendous background that he has. And we got connected to my friend Rob McCourt, who was my old coach at the USL when I played with the New Jersey Stallions. And Rob and John are two Kearney soccer guys, and Kearney is like soccer town, USA.
It always back to New Jersey. It always comes back to Jersey.
So John was just tremendous, though. We still stay in touch to this day, and just gave me so many different pointers and watch outs and things to work on and things not to focus on that I thought were important.
Yeah.
And like I started thinking about what the stadium would look like, and John's like, there's 4,000 steps before you actually get to that.
Never
like
get there.
Focus on the critical elements here is getting the right location. Kind of reinforce some of the things that Warren was saying. And then we talked about other contacts, and he connected me with other folks. And so I went to a game in Tulsa, went to a game in Memphis as well. Mm-hmm. So I got to see multiple markets, and through that you learn. There's some really great examples, and there's some things where I said, yeah, we probably don't ever want to do that.
Right.
I won't say what those are publicly, but there's a few.
There's a few.
Yeah. And but that's part of the learning process, And so that was kind of all happening as Warren wasn't in the project yet. Me and you have barely just met.
Barely just started talking.
Yeah. Yep. And that was all leading to just building more support and momentum. And so probably in the 2022-ish range at this point, right?
Yeah.
Around that time. So should I tell the funny story about how we met, Wes?
I think it's a good time to tell the funny story
because I think the timeline correlates closely to this.
We'll probably have to repeat it in a future episode, but it's all part and parcel.
How about a little sneak peek?
We'll do a sneak peek. Yeah. It's all part and parcel to the actual origin story here. So because you and I have been talking for quite a while.
I had thought I was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, soccer fans in Northwest Arkansas. And I'm at a friend's house, and we'll get into all the details, and we'll go into details a little bit later on. Long story short, I get a comment from the friend that I was visiting, who's not a soccer fan at all.
No,
love what we were doing again, like just typical reaction, like love the idea, love the location, everything.
Yeah.
But said, man, I have no idea about soccer. I never watch soccer. He's like, I'll go to these games because I think it'll be fun, but I really don't know what I'm watching.
Yeah.
I said, that's great. But he goes, I have a crazy soccer fan who would like love to talk to you. And so long story short, we'll give the details. Calls Wes. It's about 10:30 on Friday night. Wes was still working at his job.
I was.
And came over at 10:35, and we talked for like about 3 hours that night. And I realized that he truly was a bigger soccer fan than I was. And that's where that relationship kind of started and obviously progressed at a very, very gradual but rapid rate more recently. So
yeah.
All these contacts and all these networks just
I was one
helped
of many.
It helped build where we are today because there's no way we could do this without the community support, period.
And we have talked a little bit about some of the tailwinds in terms of soccer and in particular soccer in the U.S. That just makes this almost, there's never a perfect time to do anything, right? We always say that, like people oh yeah, never a perfect time to get married, never a perfect time to have kids. There's never a perfect time to launch a soccer club.
Yeah.
This is almost darn close to it in terms of the United States and what we have going on. So talk a little bit about some of those things that we have coming.
Yeah, well, we have one of the fastest growing regions in America.
Yeah.
And we have, arguably the fastest growing league and sport in America. Yeah. And so that combination at a really high level just makes a lot of sense, right?
Right.
But then when you kind of peel the onion back a little bit, you start to think about where soccer was and what's happening right now in front of our eyes. And so I'm old enough that I could go back to the Pele games.
Yeah.
We thought soccer was going to explode, but the league was just set up to bring in these stars that had no foundation. When the money dried up from the owners putting it in, the league folded and poof, it was gone. There's a great documentary on the old NASL that's really, really good. And so you kind of went dry with professional sports in the 80s. And when I was kind of growing up, I watched the 1986 World Cup. The only game that they televised was the 1986 World Cup final. And it was Argentina versus West Germany at the time. Diego Maradona's big moments, right?
RIP.
Yep. And so that was cool. I got to watch a game because before that, we watched it on Telemundo. My dad would have it on Spanish language. We didn't know any Spanish, but that was how we watched it, you know? Now my kids could turn on and you could watch almost any game in every country, whether it's on regular TV or streaming in minutes. Right? It's amazing where the game has gone. But a few elements that happened along the way. The 1994 World Cup came here into the U.S. and it was still the most attended World Cup ever. So in terms of population, the U.S. in 1994 had the most attended World Cup still to this day, which is amazing when you just let that sink in for a second.
Wild. And it was also where they were playing too, right? Which was
Massive
like a lot
stadiums.
of the NFL stadiums and things like that they brought in.
80,000+ in many games. Through that, the MLS is formed, right? The World Cup kind of came and really one of the mandates from FIFA was have a professional league that is sustainable and can survive long term. And so that started in 1996. So I was in college at the time, and we were just so excited. I remember going to the first MetroStars game at the time. They became the New York Red Bulls. But that
I were probably at the same game at some point.
Probably, I'm sure.
Going to games.
I'm sure we were.
In the early MLS days.
Yeah.
I was there, and DC United, my team, won.
You had a
very
great
first with your friend John Hartz.
Yep.
So it's
legendary teams of DC United.
Marco Echeverri, Jaime Moreno,
amazing. So kind of fast forward, the league, I would say, is surviving but not thriving, right?
Yeah, no.
Soccer is still in its infancy stages. No one's making money at this point. Like the league's they're subsidizing this to keep it going, and these were just pioneers and passionate, businessmen that believed in where the sport was going to go, and man, were they right. But it was really rough early on. But the game just kept growing little by little, and the U.S. national team starts to get better, and then you have great success in the women's national team, right? The 99ers, right? And you'd go into the 90s and 2000s, and we're dominating on the women's side, and we're at least getting competitive on the men's side, right? Because you got to remember, from 1950 to 1990, we didn't make the World Cup.
Nope.
1990, John Harkes, Tab Ramos, Tony Meola, Jersey guys, sorry.
Again,
make it to the World Cup in 90, go to Italy, get crushed, but
best kit, by the way, ever.
It's classic. Yeah, it's classic. And then 94, they get to play at home.
Yeah.
And I end up playing Brazil on July 4th. Never forget. Leonardo elbows Tab Ramos and knocks him out. And that was the end of the game. 1-0 loss.
Yep.
But it was great. Like that, we beat Colombia that year. We were supposed to win the whole thing. So that really just started to grow the sport. Right now, we're at this level that dwarfs all of that I just talked about. Dwarfs it. Because we have a couple factors, right? The professional leagues, both the MLS and especially now the USL, is giving soccer to all these communities that didn't have access to it before. Right?
Exactly.
MLS is going to be limited to how many markets they can go to. USL's been able to go to almost unlimited markets for now. At some point that ends, but they've been able to bring soccer and professional sports to these great markets. And so as that progressed, the game is growing and growing. Now you have the world's best player, arguably the greatest of all time. I know people.
No argument for me.
I know some people are going to say CR7 or Diego Maradona or Pele back in the day, or
Yeah.
But listen, it arguably is always an argument, right? Just like a basketball debate in the GOAT with LeBron and Jordan. It's Jordan, but we all know it's Jordan.
At this
anyway.
table, argue.
Yeah. So that just started to really just snowball with this momentum. So the league's doing well. Both leagues are doing great. We now have Messi playing in the States. And it's just
still wild.
The amount of attention is just amazing towards it. And then you fast forward, and we have multiple events happening in the U.S. over the next couple of years. We have Copa America, which is a championship of traditionally South America, combining all of the Americas together. It's going to be played in America. So the Messi will stay in America and play for Argentina versus Brazil and Colombia in America. Canada, Mexico, all those teams.
It's kind of like the World Cup, but for the Western Hemisphere, basically.
Yep. Exactly right. And then we go into 2025 when we actually host in America again the Club World Championships. This is where teams like Liverpool, I got the plug to Liverpool for Tottenham Hotspur, maybe Manchester United, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich. These teams will come together and play a championship, and they'll be hosted in the U.S., which is just awesome, right?
It's so cool.
And then the big event. The main event is the 2026 World Cup, which is just going to explode this sport to another level in America, hosted by Canada and Mexico. And the team's going to the World Cup's going to expand to 48 teams at that point.
It will,
and so you'll have even more teams and more numbers, and we'll break all the records again. We'll break our own records,
and
for sure.
Folks in Northwest Arkansas are going to be pretty close to some matches too, with Sporting Kansas City, or probably Arrowhead, actually, the stadium that'll host it. But Kansas City and then also Dallas are among the host cities, and Dallas is even in conversations for a final to be held there. So. It's going to be great for not only the country again, but also this region being so close to some of these bigger games and stadiums and opportunities to go and watch. So you just said in episode 1, right? Highly recommend if you can get to a World Cup match, it's coming, and it's coming right to our doorstep. So
Absolutely.
this is just going to be such an amazing next 2 years of groundswell and continued growth with things that are all happening within the community of soccer. And to be able to, in the background, continue to be working to build our club is just such a cool, timeline and cohesion of coincidences or events or whatever you want to call it. Just this perfect platform to launch. So
Absolutely. The timing couldn't be better. Honestly, it couldn't.
And then after the men's World Cup, we've got the Paris Olympics actually before in 2024, which isn't here, but it's another international soccer, event that's going to be happening to again draw the world's eye. And then you've also got the Women's World Cup, which is potentially, we're up for either 2027 or 2031, one of them.
Those are the two. Yeah.
The next tournaments to host again on the women's side.
Amazing.
Which is going to be important because, as we always want to remind people, we're not just bringing a men's side. We are bringing men's and women's professional soccer to Northwest Arkansas. And so it's just as important on the women's side, and the swell and the talent that's on display and the 99ers and the U.S. women's national team is just as important to the history and the swell, and perhaps even more so, in terms of where we're at today. And so it's just that perfect time for us. We couldn't have asked for anything better with the location and the partnerships that we've gotten into place. And, guys, we're just at the beginning. We're still here. Chris has been in it for years. It feels like it's been a second job for years and years. Marcy is your wife. Is probably can't wait until we get to say, oh, okay. But we're just getting started. So as we are with the project, as we are with this podcast, we're just getting started. So guys, stay tuned. We're going to continue to tell our story. And we're going to bring you along for the journey. So it's going to be a great ride, and we can't wait to continue to tell it. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Wes.